Listen. Good evening, good night, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are on the planet Earth. Welcome to another edition of Genovision Media. And today we will be talking to Nigel Stewart, who is the CEO of Centre of Pan-African Thought, and he's an entrepreneur. And he's going to be talking to us today about post-traumatic slavery disorder. I don't know if you've ever heard of the term before, but we will be breaking down what it actually means, seeing if it is actually a real phenomenon. Get my teeth back in. And we will just be getting more information about it. So, hi Nigel, please, I've just given a short introduction, so please tell the people a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then we'll get right into it.
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me on, Jen, and greetings to your audience. You sum it up well. I'm an entrepreneur who's had multiple business ventures in my career. I guess the one that relates to the discussion that we're having is called the Centre of Pan-African Thought, in which we publish and produce essays and material around Pan-African thinking, Black consciousness, Afro consciousness, and we also hold monthly or 2 monthly debates on community issues, and we also engage in community education. So that's currently what I'm working on now. We're almost a year old, and it's going really, really well. It's been well received by the community, and I'm very proud of the work that my team do to help bring us this kind of ideas and shed light on what is our condition, and also to help us determine and chart a better future for the generations to come. So, yeah.
Brilliant. So you're really doing a lot for the community.
Yeah, we're trying. I think it's very important that we have community engagement and education, because our story seems to be marginalized, and we definitely need people to step out of the shadow and do the work for the next generation, and help them raise their level of consciousness, and help them not suffer the fate that many of us have suffered here in the West, and indeed on the continent.
Okay, so before we start actually going into post-traumatic slavery disorder, can you just please explain what is Pan-Africanism, being a Pan-Africanist? Because I think today we kind of view it as a little bit different than what it originally comes from. So what is a Pan-Africanist or Pan-Africanism to you?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I get asked this all the time, and it seems like there's different strands or ideas of Pan-Africanism. Some people say it's about economic and political unity. Some say it's about consciousness and cultural reappropriation, redeveloping our sense of self, and they take the soft approach. I determine Pan-Africanism as the ideology that brings us together as under a common banner and a common cause to deal with the issues we face as people of the diaspora in relation and connection to the continent. And that's on every level. So it could be with a big P if you're dealing with economics and political activism, but also what I call a little p as well if you're dealing with the culture that we find ourselves in, and trying to find a place and a space to exist in our entirety and fullness with freedom and liberty in the diaspora. So that's my version of Pan-Africanism. The word itself goes back to, it's traced back to many American scholars out of the Black nationalist movements in the early 20th century. But the term itself was really, should I say, popularized by people like W.E.B. Du Bois, people like Henry Sylvester Williams, who organized conferences and um, really started the work of trying to create a movement of equality, justice, and freedom for Africans around the world. Um, a lot of those components are based on, if we want to go further, Garveyism, um, a lot of work by Booker T. Washington, who was a very big influence on Garvey. But in a sense, it's about unity and justice and all the work that's encompassed in allowing us total liberation and freedom. Hello?
Sorry, I'm just trying to get my camera. I'm just trying to get my camera back up. Bear with me one moment. The technical things of trying to hold everything together. Okay. Brilliant. Okay, so that gave us like a very good kind of outline of the different types of being a Pan-Africanist. So he gave us, you know, a real broad spectrum there. So now we're going to go into post-traumatic slavery disorder. What is it? Obviously, we've heard of post-traumatic stress disorder. What actually is post-traumatic slavery disorder?
Well, it's an idea that came out of PTSD. So that was a popular thought that emerged from studies in which soldiers of war came back traumatized after what they'd seen in battle. And so the phrase was coined by someone called Dr. Joy DeGruy, who wrote a book in 2005. She's a psychologist from America and a social scientist. She coined the phrase as a way to, it was a prognosis, if you like, of some of the ills that we face as Africans. Her study was focused on America, but essentially it was theories in which we could understand some of the pathology, some of the condition, some of the ills, as I say, that we face as Africans, particularly in America.
Sorry, my feedback is awful. Do you actually think that it really exists? And you know, when did it start? Because we kind of have a strange history of like Black people, especially in you know, other countries like westernized countries. You know, when we came from whether it was the Caribbean or Africa, back in the 60s and such forth, and even before, we seem to be doing quite well. Obviously, there was a lot of racism that we had to deal with. There was a lot of prejudice and such forth, but we seem to be doing a little bit better than we are now. You know, there's a lot more kind of social ills that are coming about, you know, and you know, obviously we have a lot of issues with certain demographics of our people. So you know, just go into a little bit of where it kind of came from. Do you actually believe that it is a real phenomenon and such forth? Us, welcome back, Nigel.
Sorry about that.
That's absolutely fine. We know how it goes.
Yeah,
okay,
those
so,
technicals seem like
yeah, that's fine. I was asking you about I asked you about post-traumatic slavery disorder. What is it, and do you believe it's real?
Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry, I lost my thread. But yeah, post-traumatic slave syndrome is very real in my opinion. And what Joyce highlighted are some of the maladaptive that we practice in the community, some of the behavioral traits that we keep repeating situations. So things like anger, things like hypersensitivity, uh, in which we form bondings and relationships, our racialization. These things are very core to our community. And there's one aspect of Africanism which deals with the external equality on an economic and political level, but also as well create some of the internal work that we need. And we have to take responsibility in shaping our own and culture. And in my the research does, it gives us a way to bottle that, a way to frame that. It finally gives us a term to say, okay, what it is, and which we can then start to look at prescriptions to self-heal. So I think it's real, purely on the basis of PTSD is real and is found to be real, and the scientific that very. So if you look at, as I mentioned before, some of the did on soldiers, some of the studies they did with the Jewish Holocaust as well. All
Oh yeah.
so
Yeah.
I believe that it's real purely based on the fact that a lot of Dr. Joy's research came out of the idea of PTSD, and the studies done on PTSD are very comprehensive. So I think I mentioned soldiers coming back from war, and I also mentioned the Jewish Holocaust as well, in which a lot of people who suffered, and then the generations after had lots of genetic and problems and struggles, community problems and individual struggles to actually overcome that trauma. So if you look at how trauma works and how trauma functions, and then you see PTSS as an extension of all that theory, then I think it's fair to say and conclude that PTSS is very, very real. Because if we ask the question, have we ever really dealt with slavery? Have we ever dealt with what happened and the horrors of what we went through as Africans? I think the answer to that is comprehensively no. So understanding how trauma functions, and understanding, putting that together with the fact that we haven't really dealt with that legacy from a psychological perspective, then I think Dr. Joy's work is very important.
Okay. So, have I gone on mute again? No, I'm not on mute. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, cool. Just keep on checking if I'm on mute or not. Okay, so okay, that's very interesting. I'll go back to the analogy between post-traumatic stress disorder in a minute. But what I really want to know is, can everyone, or are we all suffering with post-traumatic syndrome? And even people that weren't necessarily descendants of slaves?
Yeah, now that's a really, really good question. And I want to broaden it, because although Dr. Joy's research focused on chattel slavery and those horrors, you know, the raping, the lynching, the horrors of the Middle Passage, you know, those kind of explicit details of slavery, she does touch on that. There's another aspect of work as well, in which we had colonization, if you're talking about our brothers and sisters on the continent, and we have institutional racism as well, which we face daily, you know, face problems with daily. We interact with that daily. So there's not only what we call macroaggression, there's also microaggression, you know, that we face on a daily basis, and those can cause trauma. Our response can also cause trauma. So whether it's sort of hiding yourself to fit in, whether it's trying to understand how you've been socialized and then feeling ostracized or feeling disconnected and disenfranchised from society at last, that also creates trauma. So it's my belief, and I'm sure there's some people that won't hold this belief, is that as Africans in this system, with the world, the way the world has been shaped, that we do, every one of us needs to do that internal work and try to heal, and bring our own emancipation to fruition. So I think yes to that question, even though it's quite a contentious theory.
Okay. So,
What do you think?
sorry.
What do you think?
Oh, what do I think? Um, I definitely think that there is a link, especially now when I'm, learning more about, psychological traumas and stuff like that, and the way that things can affect you, even generationally or even in a family. Um,
Mm,
there's definitely a lot of scientific research to suggest that that can happen.
mm,
So I definitely think it affects a lot of people. And but as you've said, you brought into a lot of things like institutionalized racism, and a lot of the kind of stigmatisms of just being kind of displaced and not necessarily being asked to be displaced. Do you know what I mean? Even though, yeah, our parents came over here and whatever, but it was literally because they needed a better life. They didn't really have a lot of a choice. It wasn't like, oh yeah, they've got money, they can go live wherever they want in the world. And even now, we've got situations where you come to Britain and you're not really felt very welcome if you don't have the red passport, and you have to like do everything in your power to try and convince them that you'll make a really good citizen. And you're like, come on, really, like, do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
I think even that can have like a lot of trauma on people, and thinking that, oh well, I have to be a certain way, or they automatically think that I'm just trying to get money out of their system, or I must be a bad person just because I'm trying to create a better life for myself. I mean, you can even see it happening with the Eastern Europeans. So do you know what I mean? It's just a weird phenomenon. I need to stop saying that word because like it's not happening today.
Well, I think you raise a good point, and it's also very crucial to note. I mean, I think some of what we exhibit, some of our behavior, is learned, and people aren't necessarily aware, that they're living out trauma. So, looking at intergenerational and epigenetics, sometimes you can indoctrinate your children into a behavior, into a way of thinking, and then they can live that out, not necessarily understanding and tracing it back to the trauma, the original trauma, but they still live in that ignorance, and suffer as a result. So I think it's important to know, and I think people will disagree, like, no, I'm fine, I'm okay, I function well, I have a good job, I have this, that, or the other. But all those external components do not tell the full story. They do not substitute from the facts that we've all faced, this horror. We've all come from, um, a system of oppression that we need to deal with.
That's really put a lot of it into perspective. I've written a list of things that I believe may affect, or have had an effect because of this post-traumatic slavery syndrome.
Hit
And
me.
I just want your opinion about it. And you can go into it as much as you want, but I just think some of these issues that we have, does it necessarily have an effect? So, like our economic success, do you think that our economic success or unsuccess of economics, do you think that has a part to play? Because why is it so hard? I mean, even like being a black owned business, or things like that nature, there's you know, there's not a lot of trust, there's not a lot of support from your own community. Like, talk a bit about economic success. Is that an effect?
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the theories that Joy kind of really brings out is this whole idea of vacant esteem. Um, and if you read that part of the book, what she's saying is basically people cannot have, they cannot lose self-esteem that you didn't have in the first place. And that's one of the things that slavery robbed us of. Now, you also have to come from, or well, I come from a position that everything emanates from consciousness and your own self-awareness and sense of self. So in taking responsibility for your own success and failure, regardless of the system of oppression that we live in, if you want to take that responsibility, then you know that every action that you take has a reaction and a consequence. So taking the responsibility for the outcomes in my life will tell me that, you know, the way in which I think, my consciousness has been, you know, impaired. So from that perspective, yes, economics plays a massive part, because to be economically free, you have to have high levels of self-esteem. To run a business, you have to have high levels of confidence. To actually go out and do the hard work of trying to get a company off the ground, you have to have high levels of self-worth. If you even want to exist in the labor market, you have to have high levels of self-esteem, especially if you want to move through the classes, if you want to move with the economic times and have a job that, you know, can meet your living expenses. All of that comes right back to personal and self-development. And personal self-development is basically at the heart of everything that you need to do to achieve. So if you have this vacant self-esteem or a lack of esteem, then you're gonna feel it in the pocket and in other areas too. So relationships. Now it could be the relationship that you build with your peers or with your boss that is fraught and fractured. You might not have those skills because you might have, say, for an example, an inferiority complex. That's going to manifest in you not being able to work in a corporate environment. So these are the kind of subtle ways in which the consequence of the trauma plays out. And economics is one of those manifestations, if you like.
Yeah, so you touched
I
on
hope that answers your question.
relationships as well. So I was going to ask you about that in regards to, you know, man and woman, you know, marriage, whatever. But also I want to ask about crime rates. Like, is it, you know,
Yeah.
what do you think about the high levels of crime rates in Black communities? Well, is that got something to do with it, or is it something totally different?
Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the things that I'm a big champion of is, again, going back to our consciousness, developing African consciousness and African nationalism, in a sense of understanding that we all have this commonality. We all have this sense of belonging from the same place. That's kind of the central theme in Pan-Africanism, that we have solidarity based on the fact that we are from the motherland and we are of the same race. And I don't see people people who identify as family killing each other. It's very hard, if you can identify yourself in someone else, to inflict harm and pain on them. And I think what happens, especially in young people, is that the trauma and vacant self-esteem, the lack of racial esteem, creates this us and them. So they find the esteem and they find self-worth in other things, such as their area or their postcode or their gangs or their turf or something like that. And then that kind of gives them the premise to then inflict pain on other people. But when you have your family, when we're brothers, sisters, when we're part of a tribe and a community and all that makes a community, you don't tend to do that. And for me, that's very much a function of racial esteem and the collective consciousness that we have or don't have, as the case may be.
And just to touch on the relationship aspect, what do you think about that? I know you read the question.
Yeah, I was trying to sidestep that one. Um, Same again. I mean, I don't want to get controversial, but if we're going on the premise of trying to create equality and power and um, make space for ourselves in the world to live on an equal footing with other communities, I think we cannot do that without relationships. Obviously, the relationship between man and woman, it aggregates outwards. It builds up. So the first job of Pan-Africanism, I always say, is the one of your home. It's to create a stable and loving home. And then that builds outwards to your community. And then it's communities that champion the causes of institutions. So need to come together, man and woman, to raise families, strong units, to be able to build these communities, to be able to survive. For me, it's a question of survival. And if we don't know how to build relationships, if we don't have the right relationship education, or we don't value our sisters, or we don't look at them as equal, if we don't eradicate misogyny, if we don't champion and fight for gender equality, then it's going to be hard. We're going to keep repeating the cycle of fractured relationships. And out of those fractured relationships comes, children who will then again embody or live the experience of that trauma of growing up without a father or a mother, and then perpetuate the problem. And that's one of the ways in which a community can kill itself. And that for me is one of the most saddest things, is that me growing up in a single parent household, looking at my own personal history, I can see so much trauma and pain from not having my dad around, not having a father to teach me to be a man. I still see the deficits in myself today. So as a small example, a trivial one, I'm not a great handyman, for example. You would think that that's sort of a father's job, to teach his young son, come out with me, come learn to chop wood and make fire and be a man, do all the things that we think men should do. I never had that, totally absent. So I can't then pass that on to my son unless I consciously learn those skills. And that's a small example of the things that we miss when we are stuck in this cycle of fractured and broken relationships. And we spend a lot of time on relationship education at the center. We put on a workshop to help people heal, help people to understand the trauma of being in a relationship that didn't work, and then breaking up and being emotionally disconnected from someone, and then go on and learn the tools, acquire the skills to build stronger and more prosperous relationships, hoping that that will mean that we can bond as a community ultimately.
Yeah. So is that like kind of the solutions then, is kind of breaking everything down and dealing with them like, separately, or what kind of solutions do we need? Because one of the things that I was thinking about is, if with any other disorder, syndrome, whatever you want to call it, mental health, not unsettled behavior, whatever you want to call it, there's therapies, there's this, there's that. I'm not really into the medication, but whatever is there. But there's so many things. So what are the kind of solutions? Because it's not really, can we really see somebody walking into a doctor's surgery and saying, oh yeah, you've got post-traumatic slavery syndrome,
Mm.
and we're gonna put you on a course of counseling, we're gonna put you on a course of medication? Do you know what I mean? Do you see that happening? What kind of solutions are we looking at?
Well, in my opinion, there's a range of solutions, and they're both internal and external. There's not one solution for that type of problem. I think it's a multidisciplinary approach. And I always say it comes down to 3 C's. One is consciousness, as I've said. The second is community. And the third is our corporate institutions. And they're all interlinked. And on the first level of consciousness, demystifying the ideas about our mental health and what we've been through is very important. Understanding, yes, first of all, you know what, I have a problem. On the exterior, I might look great, you know, I might feel great, but in some senses, there's things missing from my life. There's things that I need to repair. It could be that I have, you know, it could be that I'm viewing Black women in a negative way, objectifying them. You know, I'm caught up in misogyny. It could be that I lack a personal discipline. You know, that's a problem. And I can't seem to sit down and read a book and finish it. It could be that, you know, I have financial problems. You know, I seem to be unable to save. I seem to get my money and then spend it on frivolous things because that makes me feel good. That gratifies me. You know, so the individual work on your own consciousness, I think, is the first step for anyone who is in this struggle. It's a step that I'm on, and it's a step that I always teach as the one and only foundation on which you can then go on to do anything that is sustainable and of true value to the nation, to the community. And in that developing consciousness, you've got your own personal development, but then once you are strong enough to admit you're weak enough, you do embrace the idea of therapy. You do embrace the idea of different types of, you know, emotional well-being practices. It's all about rejuvenating the spirit. It's all about going back to our ancestral roots, going back to the things which can repair us psychologically. The food we eat as well, that's another important part of it. But once you understand that, then embracing things like psychotherapy is 100% an option and 100% something that I endorse wholeheartedly. I've had therapy myself on multiple occasions, and not necessarily for, you know, big, massive, you know, events that happened in my life, but just being able to have a secure attachment with someone, just being able to actually talk to someone and download and get a perspective and hear myself think, you know, hear myself rationalize the thoughts that are in my mind and the ideas that are driving my experience. I actually am a big believer that psychotherapy should be compulsory from school age. So in high school, I think there should be psychotherapy available to our teenagers because they see a lot on the streets. You know, they experience a lot at home. So it's all about demystifying that, taking the shame out of our mental condition, being able to own our condition, and then being able to embrace, you know, the different types of therapies and solutions that are out there, because they are out there. I just think that sometimes, especially as Africans, we have this, you know, belt and braces approach that we're too shamed to air our dirty linen. You know, we're too shamed to ask for help. We don't want to look to our neighbor and say that we're suffering. But that is part of the condition. That is part of the trauma. Not being strong enough to admit that you're weak and brave enough to say that I need help. So we need to work on that very, very strongly as the first base for us bringing healing, macro healing to our community.
I just got a question. Can you elaborate on what you're saying about going back to the past? What do you do when you go back to the past?
Going back to the past in a therapeutic context, you mean?
Oh,
I think in relation to the past, it's the same old adage, you know, not to live in the past and dwell on the past, but to understand the past in order to move forward. And history plays a massive, massive part in who we are. History plays a massive part in shaping of our identities, you know. And I think you can only start to deal with your stuff, with your issues, with the real you, the sense of who you are, you're coming from, if you know what your experiences are. And that doesn't just go back to from when you were born. That also goes back through your ancestry, through your lineage, through the generations. You know, how many of us grow up to say, oh, you know what? Stop ourselves, and we get into our 30s and 40s, and then we realize, oh, you know what? I'm just like my father, you know, in certain ways, or I'm just like my mother. You know, it just hits you as you get older. You're like, oh, like I vowed never to, you know, repeat these behaviors. But somehow we do, we fall into them. That's all what we call epigenetics, or what Joy DeGruy calls epigenetics, in which the environmental shifts and changes in our history before we were here have transmuted, if you like, our DNA into the experience of now. It's shaped our behavior of now. So when you do the work of digging up and understanding, you know what, my father, my father's father, my mother, these are the bloodlines that I come from. This is my true history. I came from royalty, or this is my tribe, or this is my village. This type of history is crucial to shaping your future trajectory. And not many people stop to do that kind of work. You know, go and get a DNA test. Go and find out, first of all, where your DNA comes from, pinpoint which tribe in Africa you originated from. That is a good start. It will shift your business and your mindset immediately. So looking at history is crucial to shaping destiny and future. And that is work in and of itself, of someone who's disciplined enough to turn off the things that feel good, the TV, the sports activities, although exercise is a really important part. But make time for personal development, make time to study, make time to look into your lineage and your family tree. Go and sit down and talk to your mum and dad and ask them, who was Aunt so and so? What did grandma, you know, think about this? When did you start going to church? What was it like living in Jamaica? When did you first come to this country? What was it like? I sat down and asked my parents all these questions, and you'd be staggered at how much they contain that helps us to understand who we are, just in our first generation. And go back as far as you can. So that study of history, your history, and then the history around us plays a huge part in helping us raise the levels of self-esteem that we need, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I have to agree with you there, because in terms of making sure that you're okay, and especially in our community, we are just terrible at you know just identifying that we have issues sometimes. And
Sure, yeah.
it's very important that, like, where as I become older, I realize that, no, do you know what, your faults and your the things that go on in your head, um they do matter, because they kind of create the person that you are. So if you're not having like good thoughts, and you're not having, you're not feeling good about yourself, I mean, why are we here if we are not able to be able to focus positively, and whatever we put our mind to, try and achieve it. So it's definitely so important to um make sure, like you said, just even talking to someone is so important. Just airing it out, letting it bounce off somebody. I don't know if it's the vibrations, I don't know if it's whatever it is, but it just it makes you feel, it's like, they say a problem shared is a problem halved, or whatever. But you know, and people always can give you good advice, even if they don't take it themselves. They can always look from the perspective and give you good advice. Obviously, it's better to go to somebody that is, you know, a professional or whatever, but, you know, we'll lead up to that, because a lot of us, we don't want to do that because, you know, we feel like, oh no, there's nothing, you know, I can't be going and, you know, telling people my business, as you said. So, you know, I think these are kind of steps, and especially even being a parent, and even our parents as well, because our parents are terrible with those types of things. Like you said, you have to literally drag information out of them. They're not very forthcoming. So
Yeah.
again, you have to check if they're okay, and, you know, let them talk, and let them kind of process things. So, you know, being in probably our generation, we've got a hard job, because we've got our parents and we've got our children, and things are kicking off on both sides. Do you know what I mean? So it's like we've got to make sure that we're kind of in that balance, to get things, you know, good, and you know,
Yeah.
just start healing.
And what I want to say about that also, you're absolutely right, is that it's all about having secure attachments. So even if you don't go to a professional, have a bond with someone. And for those people who are emotionally strong enough, be that sounding board for someone. You know, if you see someone struggling, take the time to listen. One of the things in which I think we are terrible at in our community is listening. You know, and listening that involves the complete and total understanding of where someone is and what they need, not necessarily what they say or what they do, but being able to truly listen and connect with someone has tremendous power in itself. It has healing power in and of itself. And if we start listening to each other and wear that secure attachment with each other, then our emotional health and mental health can improve a lot more. So be that person. That's what I will say to your audience. Be that person for someone. Even if you have to mentor one as someone mentors you, that's still giving that person an opportunity to release what's in them, because we all carry that in our melanin. We all carry that pain, you know, and releasing that pain, sometimes it's like it really is like a weight off your shoulders. And the amount of times that I will speak to my friends and say, I have a problem with this, that, or the other. And you know what? As I'm talking, a solution will come and I'll feel better. You know, I couldn't tell you. And that's the power of really having secure attachments and being able to listen.
Brilliant. Thank you, for giving that, you know, some of that insight, because definitely, we need that. So hopefully, we can move forward. Somebody did ask in the chat, do you know anywhere where you could get DNA testing?
The name escapes me at the moment. There's a company that, it's an American company, and if they leave their name on the chat, I'll look up the link on our website and I'll post it to them.
Okay. Well, hopefully, hopefully you will be able to leave some details on the video link. So if people want to connect with Centre of Pan-African Thought, they can definitely get those details on the link.
Yes,
So
yeah,
yeah,
I will make them available.
Say that again.
Yes, I'll make them available.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. That's great. So yeah, that you've given us a really big insight into the post-traumatic slavery syndrome, and I've definitely become a lot more informed. And you know, it's definitely, we have these conversations. You know, people can look into the research themselves, and they can kind of identify what's going on with ourselves, because I think we've heard all the stories of the, you know, horrific things that we went through slavery. Then we've heard all the, you know, the way that we've been treated since slavery. but you know, it's time to kind of, you know, get to the point where we can actually deal with the situation and start healing. And you know that like there's a lot more to us than that. We had a history way before slavery, and we can have a future without it. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, it's been brilliant talking with you, Nigel. And to be honest, there's so many topics that I could pick your brain with, because you just have so much information. So could you please tell the audience, you know, what is coming up next, what kind of events you're doing, and how, you know, how they can connect with you and see what's happening, because I know you've got some interesting things coming up.
Yeah, so the centre has an anniversary event on the 15th of June, and we're asking, is Britain a post-racial society? And we've got a panel of very, very prominent speakers who have worked extensively in the field of diversity, research around racism, not just Black racism, but white racism as well. And we'll be trying to unpick what we need to do or find solutions to creating an equality and just society that we deserve. We didn't really go into the statistics. We didn't even go to employment statistics, poverty statistics. You know, 40% of us are in poverty, twice as likely to be unemployed as white people, 5 times more likely to be sectioned under the mental health. See, all these things, you know, as a result of institutionalized racism, we need to tackle. And on the 15th, on our anniversary event, we'll be looking for those solutions. And one of the reasons I hold the debates is so when we have solutions, we can have a bank of ideas to take forward, whether that will be in the form of a workshop or it'll be in the form of training, whether it be in the form of activism or lobbying or campaigning. You know, we love to bring the solutions that our audience bring and try and put them into practice. So I encourage everyone to come out. The tickets are available at panafricanthought.com. On top of the knowledge and the expertise, it's also a great networking opportunity. So the connections that we make in the room, the relationships that we develop with like-minded people, it's a great space for that. And it's usually a very, very well attended and fun evening. So we've got that coming up. And we've also got a series of sort of personal development workshops later on in the summer, where we'll be looking at the African psyche, trying to repair the African psyche, the study of the true self, if you like. So one of our workshops is called The Science of Black Genetics and Melanin, and trying to understand how the environmental changes and behaviors that we have influence our melanin and influence our genes, and what happens to us as a result of some of the things that we put into this vessel. And then we also have a workshop on spirituality, which is a workshop that came out of a debate we had on religion. And so we'll be teaching how to practice African spirituality, what that actually means, connecting with ancestors, how to set up an altar and go about practicing in a very safe way, in a right and pure way, and begin to use original spiritual practice as a way to self-heal as well. So we're looking at solutions for, you know, self-repair and giving people tools as part of this overall theme of dealing with the trauma, because the trauma is real. I think we all have, to degrees, different things in us as Africans that we've experienced and have to deal with. And we're determined at the center to be at the forefront of, you know, that transformation that we need in this country for sure, and hopefully one day internationally.
That is brilliant. That is just so many things that you're covering. So guys, you need to get out and check out these debates and lectures. I mean, that spirituality one and that religion, I see I stayed far away from religion today.
I know you want to come back on that one.
I haven't got the energy today. I haven't. But
Although different.
I will lead up to that one day. And definitely, you're gonna have to be on my panel, Nigel, because I know you go in and you have a lot to say about it. But yeah, definitely the
I'll bring my tin hat. Don't worry.
yeah, the African spirituality. I think I don't know. It's very pertinent for me now, just because of certain things that are happening in my life. In terms of how people are dealing with it so incorrectly, if you know what I mean, like really incorrectly. And I just think it's definitely important to know, know yourself, and know about, like you said, know about your history and stuff like that, because when you've got other people telling you, oh, this is how it should be done and you should be doing that and blah blah blah, and a lot of times it's manipulation, and it's people just not talking out of that, talking nonsense really. So I think that is going to be another powerful debate. But yeah, definitely, is Britain a racist society? Very interesting. I've got a lot of views on that, so it's gonna be good. So guys,
We
if you
hope
need
you
to
can
get
attend.
on
You'll
down,
be our guest.
connect with Centre of Pan-African Thought. See, they're provoking thought, definitely. Yes. So it's been brilliant. I can't believe it's almost 26 minutes past 10. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties, guys. These things, it does happen. It's live. That's how it goes. But, we just want to thank Nigel for taking out time of his evening to talk with us. It's been absolutely brilliant. And we will see you guys very soon. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe and share the video to get the information out there. So thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.